roll call of the council members. And I will start with myself, Jennifer Cervenka, Chair, Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Raymond Koya, present.
Thank you. Patricia Reynolds,
Patricia Reynolds, present.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, present.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, present.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, present.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, present.
thank you, and Jerry Sahajian.
Sahajian, present.
Thanks. And from staff, we have Jeff Willis, our Executive Director,
Present, Madam Chair.
Jim Boyd, our Deputy Director,
Present, Madam Chair.
Tony DeSisto, our Chief Legal Counsel,
Present, Madam Chair.
Lisa Turner, our Recording Secretary,
Present, Madam Chair.
Laura Dwyer, our Public Outreach Coordinator. Okay, present. Ryan Moore, our Moderator.
Present, Madam Chair.
Oh, and I'm seeing you, Leah Feldman, our Coastal Policy Analyst.
Present.
Okay, and Sydney Tagney, our Court Reporter.
Present.
All right. I think that's it from staff. All right, let's start with our minutes from our last meeting, which was February 23, 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I move we approve the minutes.
Thank you,
Hudner.
Mr. Hudner. Is there a second?
Second, Don Gomez.
Thanks, Don. All right, I'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya,
Ray Koya votes aye.
Patricia Reynolds.
I abstain.
Okay, oh, you were absent.
Yes.
Okay. Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Jerry Sahajian.
Sahajian, aye.
Okay, and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. All right, on to subcommittee reports. Mr. Boyd.
Yes, Madam Chair, one subcommittee report. The council subcommittee for the rasso application held a public workshop yesterday, March the 8th, to deliberate on the proposed aquaculture project in Potter's Pond following 6 public hearings. The subcommittee report will be drafted and reviewed by the subcommittee at a subsequent meeting, and then followed by a public hearing of the council at a later date for a final decision to be rendered.
Thank you. And we're in the process of setting those dates for the,
Correct,
and,
yes.
and that will be once Tony gets together our written recommendation, then that will trigger us setting the dates, right?
Correct, Madam Chair, yes.
All right, good. All right, thank you. All right, now to you, Mr. Willis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really don't have much to report other than to regularly brief you on the Block Island reburial of the export cables from the wind farm. And National Grid is now working on their part of the project. They have their contractor coming in probably next week. So the National Grid and Ørsted have been using the last 2 weeks to line up the cable laying contractors, but that work has not started. It'll start up in the next week or so, and they are still on schedule to be completed by April-May schedule.
Okay. Any questions for either Mr. Willis or Mr. Boyd on their reports?
Just
Mr.
a
Gomez.
quick one for Jeff. Are there any start dates relative to all the wind farms that are scheduled or in play for going offshore?
So Jim can go into more detail, but Vineyard Wind would be the first one, Mr. Gomez, in that BOEM is expected to issue its final EIS and record of decision in the next few months. And they expect to have fiscal close by the end of the calendar year, maybe even before that. And then after that, they could begin their construction schedule. But that would be the first one to go back into to be in the water. The others, the others are still in the review stage.
When do we get involved with that? Or are we already involved?
We have already issued our consistency determination on Vineyard Wind back in February of 19. There was a pause under the previous administration, and Vineyard Wind also voluntarily stopped the review of their project. But it has started up again officially, and like I said, BOEM's schedule is to have their work done this calendar year, as well as the company will have fiscal close at the end of the calendar year.
Right. And your website, CRMC website's fairly up to date on that. I see the different farms listed there, I think.
Yes, and we direct people to the BOEM website for the actual schedule for each project.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, moving on to request for fee waiver 2021-02-022, Rhode Island School of Design, request for fee waiver in connection with project to maintain the Bering Salt Marsh and Dune Restoration Project. Mr. Willis, are you gonna speak to this?
I can briefly speak to these types of fee waiver requests
Okay.
when they are restoration type projects. It's something that the program is in support of, generally speaking. Restoration projects are, especially wetland restoration projects, are something we try to encourage where possible. And this particular project is something that has come in front of us in a different phase of its process several years ago. So this part of the project is entirely consistent with what was done previously in front of us. And I think the fee waiver would be warranted. We have asked the applicant to come. I don't recognize of the names I'm seeing who would be representing the applicant. But from a staff perspective, on a fee waiver request for this type of project, it is something that staff would support.
Okay, just a clarification, we're only reviewing this for the fee waiver request.
That is correct. The project itself would still need staff review and agency approval.
Okay, and the authority that we have or that the agency has for waiving the fees, is it just a discretionary provision under the management procedures of the CRMP?
It's under the management procedures
Okay.
specifically, that's correct.
Okay, and do we need to make any finding other than it's recommended by staff?
That would be one finding, and that restoration projects, generally speaking, are supportive of staff in having applicants seek these types of fee waivers.
Okay, and what would it be otherwise?
The estimated project cost would put it into the several thousands of dollars.
Okay. All right, so I'll ask if there's someone here for the applicant that would like to speak at this time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jack Silva. I'm the Vice President of Campus Services at Rhode Island School of Design, and we have applied for the fee waiver in cooperation with Save the Bay.
Okay, would you like to say anything in addition to what Mr. Willis just explained?
No, Rhode Island School of Design appreciates your support in the previous effort. I can personally say that the site is, the transformation of the work that we've done is remarkable, and I'm excited to do a second phase. So I appreciate your support if you would help us out in this way.
Thank you. Okay, any questions for Mr. Silva? All right. Is there anyone else who's attending the meeting from the public that would like to speak on this? Okay, if none, then I will ask for a motion to approve the fee waiver request.
Madam Chair, Jerry Sahajian, I will make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sahajian. Is there a second?
Madam Chair.
Second.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, any discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya,
Madam Chair, based upon the explanation provided by our executive director and my understanding of our rules and regulations, and the fact that this has been done in the past and this is not something of first instance, I would move aye. I would vote aye.
Thank you. Ms. Reynolds,
Reynolds votes aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Jared Sahajian,
Aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to approve the fee waiver carries, and we'll look forward to seeing your project again. Thank you. All right, moving on to Coastal Habitat Restoration Trust Fund applications before the council for review and decision. I'm assuming, Ms. Feldman, that you're going to speak on this?
Hi there. I believe actually Caitlin Chafee from the Narragansett Bay Research
Oh, yeah.
is going to take over for this one, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I just want to disclose to the council, in light of the council's consideration of these staff recommended coastal habitat restoration trust fund projects, that the very first project, number 1 on the council's consideration list, is a project being conducted by the Nature Conservancy. And I want to disclose on the record that I am a board trustee for the Rhode Island chapter of the Nature Conservancy. I'm a volunteer. I have no fiduciary interest. The approval of this project would not benefit me in any way. And in addition, I had no review of these projects that's done by other staff members. But in reviewing this list of proposals before the council yesterday, I realized, oh goodness, that's a Nature Conservancy project, not a surprise, but I did want to disclose on the record to the council my involvement with TNC.
Yeah. TNC is often a partner with these types of projects. Right?
That is correct. That is
Okay.
correct. Yes,
Okay, thank you for that.
indeed.
All right, so I guess to you, Ms. Chafee, it's really good to see you again.
Oh, thanks. I was having trouble unmuting myself.
That's
Thanks.
okay.
It's good to see everybody. So to council members, thank you, Madam Chair.
Do you miss our Zooms that you helped us set up?
I think Ryan is doing a fantastic job, I must say.
Yes.
So I'm glad to pass the baton on that one.
Yeah.
So if time allows, I did prepare just a short presentation to talk a little bit about the fund, give a little bit of background.
Please.
Okay. So I don't know if I can, let me just share my screen here. Oh, Ryan, it says it's disabled. I'm not sure if you can.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Right now.
Okay.
What happens when you leave?
We'll give him a break. We'll give him a break. Okay.
Oh, he disabled you.
You disabled me. Are you all able to see my presentation?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So thank you so much for this opportunity to talk about the Coastal and Estuarine Habitat Restoration Trust Fund. As most of you know, I'm before you every year with the committee recommendations for these projects. But for your benefit, I thought I'd just give a brief background. We also have been working with Leah this year. So for continuity's sake, and because of the timing, I agreed to chair the committee again this year. But Leah has been part of the committee and so has been able to be a part of the process. So we assume that responsibility will shift to her at some point. But for her benefit as well as yours, we just thought it'd be a good year to take stock. This is our 19th year of making recommendations under this fund. So our fund has become an adult and is entering adulthood here. And for those who might not know, I'm now at the Narragansett Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve. So I'm the reserve manager there. We are also a NOAA OCM program, so very similar to CRMC in that we're a state-federal partnership. We get our operating funds from NOAA, but we are not regulatory. So we work in research, education, stewardship, and training, and we're located on Prudence Island. So if you're ever on Prudence, please come pay us a visit. Just in a quick background, the fund itself is allocated annually from the state's Oil Spill Prevention Administration and Response Fund. So that's a fund administered by DEM. We get $225,000 each year to put towards habitat, coastal and estuarine habitat restoration projects. So CRMC administers the fund, we make the recommendations, we issue the payments, but the money actually sits at DEM. And the recommendations are made through our technical advisory committee, which was chaired by me this year. Just in way of process, typically we start around October. We do a request for pre-proposals that are due in November. So that's a simple one-page-ish application that helps us screen out ineligible projects and give feedback to applicants. Those pre-proposals are reviewed by the technical advisory committee. Then a subset of approved projects are asked, our applicants are invited to submit full proposals. Those are typically due in January. Those are again reviewed by the same technical advisory committee. And then we put together our funding recommendations, which are in your agenda packet this evening, and come before you for final approval. Once the council approves the awards, typically the payments are actually distributed in late April, early May at the latest. Our technical advisory committee is a great group of individuals who generously donate their time and expertise. And it's, as you can see here, it's a really broad representation of folks who are actual practitioners working in habitat restoration throughout the state. It's a nice combination of state and federal partners. And you know, we do have, if there's an agency that's directly involved in a project, we will have that member recuse themselves for that year from the process. So you'll see in your materials that Save the Bay and TNC, because they have projects that are, you know, asking for funding, that those members were recused for this year. So typically we fund all kinds of, all stages of projects. So from planning, conceptual plans, feasibility studies, through construction, but we also fund other things like monitoring and assessment post-restoration, which is very important. And occasionally we will fund things like an equipment purchase. So you maybe remember that the Department of Mosquito Abatement at DEM has requested funds for maintaining its low ground pressure excavation equipment, which helps these projects because it's then available for other applicants to use. But those are the types of projects we fund. In the legislation that established the fund, there are specific habitats that are targeted by the fund. First of those being salt marsh, so our coastal wetlands, submerged aquatic vegetation or seagrass beds, mainly eelgrass, river systems, so mainly to do with anadromous fish passage. So really, you know, river connectivity, shellfish beds. And then we do fund other types of projects that don't necessarily fit into those habitat categories, things like dune restorations, coastal uplands, coastal buffers, broader habitat inventory projects, and again, occasionally equipment purchases. Some of the common goals of these projects, lately, we've kind of shifted our focus to addressing sea level rise and climate change impacts. So building resilience of habitats, facilitating the inland migration of habitats with sea level rise, restoration of human impacts like impacts to hydrology, management of invasive species, improving habitat structure and vegetation structure. And then for river systems, it's really about removing barriers to fish movement and anadromous fish passage up and down the river system and improving connectivity. Just a few projects of pictures of past projects. So we do a lot of fish passage projects. This is one on the Woonasquatucket River, one of many that the fund has funded. So this is a system that's completely transformed, partly, you know, due to the funds from this program. Goosewing Beach in Little Compton, a gorgeous site where they've been doing long-term habitat restoration for years now, and they've successfully brought back a native salt marsh and dune plant community there. And that's a nature conservancy project as well. This is a living shoreline project in East Providence. So trying to address shoreline erosion by creating a natural marsh area with a rock sill. Dam removals, we've done a lot of those. This is Bradford Dam in Westerly. So another TNC project. They've been very active in restoring the Pawcatuck River system. And then salt marsh projects like the one in Quanaketog Pond that was led by CRMC. So pretty wide variety. I just wanted to highlight a few other points as to why the fund is so important and why it's such a positive thing for the agency to be involved in. Of course, there's the obvious, we're preserving and enhancing fish and wildlife habitat and all the values and services that go along with that. But we're also protecting, those sectors of the economy that depend on natural resources, our fisheries, our tourism, recreation. And also these coastal habitats, a lot of them are providing a protective service for our shoreline communities. So protection against coastal hazards, flooding, and storms. Habitat restoration is also one of the metrics that NOAA uses to measure performance of the coastal zone programs. And so it helps us, CRMC, I have to stop saying us, I'm doing it again, helps you to meet those performance goals. So when we would do federal reporting to NOAA, acres restored is a metric that CRMC would report out on. And so any role that CRMC plays in habitat restoration projects, including this fund, that acreage can count towards that metric. The state funds, because these are purely state funds that are being used, we can then use that state money to match federal funds. So usually what that means is that these projects have a lot of federal funding also being contributed to the projects. But any state funding that's kind of left over and not being used as match can go to match other programs. So we will report to, for instance, the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, which is an EPA funded program that needs state match. They can use our unused habitat funds as match. So no dollar is wasted, I suppose, is the point there. And then it really does, these projects are multi-agency, they are always collaborative. They really foster partnerships among agencies and organizations. And they help us use resources efficiently. Just having this committee and people talking to each other allows us to align different funding sources to get the most bang for our buck. So this is just a picture of the team that worked on the Quanaketog Marsh project. We've got URI represented, the town of Charlestown, NOAA, Fish and Wildlife Service, CRMC, DEM, just a wide variety of partners, very collaborative. And of course, our federal congressional delegation loves to hear these success stories, and it's great PR for the agency, in addition to everything else. Just some summary statistics to date. Total funds awarded through the fund, again, were in year 19, this would be year 19. To date, we've awarded $3.9 million. About 2.2 of that has been awarded towards fish passage restoration projects, 1.1 to salt marsh restoration, 150,000 for both seagrass or eelgrass and shellfish restoration. So while we've spent $3.9 million over these past 19 years, we've leveraged more than $30 million in federal funding, which is pretty impressive. So we're using these dollars to bring more federal funding into the state. And that federal funding comes from all kinds of sources. So there's the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation's Coastal Resilience Fund. Senator Whitehouse was instrumental in establishing that. And so it's great when we have Rhode Island projects that can utilize that funding, and a fund that provides state match for that. The NOAA Restoration Center through the National Marine Fisheries Office often provides federal funding, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Army Corps of Engineers. We've utilized state bond resilience funds to provide funding to these projects. And then there's always, local match. And a lot of it can be in kind. So sometimes it's management services or construction oversight or that type of thing. And occasionally we will work with NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation service, their funding is typically limited to private property, but if it's a privately owned dam, they may be able to get involved. So a wide variety of federal funding and other sources. So just to get to this year, so this would be year 19, and you do have this summary in your agenda packet, but we're proposing these 7 projects we're recommending for funding. So you'll see it, the awards total to that $225,000. This year, that would be matching funds around $710,000. That's kind of the match level we have for this year. So what I've included in your agenda packet is that list. You also have the full proposals from all of the proposals that were received in the full proposal round. We attempt to have a good geographic distribution around the state. It doesn't always work out that way, but this year we did a pretty good job. So you can see these blue points are the different project locations. And this year we span from Middletown all the way around up to Providence and down to the Pawcatuck River. So we have a wide geographic distribution this year, and that's something we strive towards if we can. This map's also included in your agenda packet. And so that is all for my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You have the listing of projects. I'm happy to answer any questions about the projects themselves or the fund in general if you have them. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Caitlin. That was a presentation. I know you've made these presentations before, but you know, this was from soup to nuts, so I appreciate it. Question for you on repeat projects. So many of these projects are multi-year endeavors with, you know, first getting it constructed over time or restored and then monitoring for its success. Is there preference for projects that are ongoing? In other words, do you see the same projects coming back each year with their federal matches and you match them?
Yeah, that does happen quite frequently. And I will say that we do consider that in our evaluation process. It's always, you know, if the fund has invested in a long-term project, that's, you know, because it's a long-term project, they've had to come back in multiple years. That is taken into consideration. You know, typically, often because they're smaller awards, we might be asked to provide the last bit of funding that's needed to get a project over the finish line. And that's something, you know, we like to see things through to completion. So yeah, it happens a lot. You know, these awards are relatively small. You know, the maximum award is typically $50,000. So usually it's that match, or if there's just like a small need for a project, that's what they're coming to us for.
And is that one of the, I did look at some of them and I know you have the criteria. Is a match one of the, it factors into the ranking?
Yes, so there is no hard and fast match requirement, but it's part of the evaluation criteria. So a proposal gets different points depending on the percentage of match that they're bringing. So okay. It helps in the scoring.
Does it make it more difficult for new projects to come in, or because you have the repeat projects, or is there a sufficient amount of funds where that really isn't an issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the repeat project is, you know, whether or not you've received past funding is not part of the scoring. So you wouldn't receive extra points for that. It would just kind of be part of the consideration. Yeah. And I think the fact that we try to cap the awards at $50,000, that's one of the reasons we do that, is so that there's enough money to go around. We're not, you know, sucking up half the fund with a really large project that's been funded multiple times. And I think at this point, you know, the main, you know, organizations like TNC are aware of that, and they're pretty respectful of that and try to, you know, if they can phase their funding or projects, that they'll do that. So I think that's part of the reason for that cap, and we try to stick to that. Occasionally we will go over, But we've always been around, I mean, 10 projects per year is kind of our goal. And we've always been right around that. We usually get quite a number of projects funded.
Okay, yeah, your number one project here is for 74,000. I would imagine, but that's got a large match also.
Yes.
I would imagine sometimes you have to go up a little in order to, I don't know, make that match work.
Yes, absolutely. And for that, there's a lot of considerations that go into it, but, one is, can we fund all of the projects that we feel have scored highly enough that they're eligible? And for that, we were able to put the extra funding to that project without sacrificing any of the highest ranking projects. So, occasionally we will do that.
So I'll just ask one more question, then if others have questions, they can ask them, but maybe you can speak to that number one project. Why is it number one in the ranking system? Why is it so valuable, or why was it so valuable when you were evaluating it?
This is the Bradford Dam project you're
The achieving aquatic connectivity in the Pawcatuck River at Hill Dam.
Yeah, so this is the fish passage on the Pawcatuck River has been an ongoing effort, since I first started at CRMC. There was stimulus money that were put into the lower Pawcatuck fish passage projects. So we see this, and it's now got wild and scenic river designation. It's just a very important system ecologically in terms of, statewide, it's an important system. You could argue, region-wide, it's an important system. So I think, first of all, it's a habitat that ranks extremely highly. And I think in this case, there has been a great deal of investment on CRMC's part, and, through this fund, in restoring fish passage on this system. So that was definitely one of the considerations in awarding the full amount that was requested.
And then the ones that were not recommended, there are just two of them. Were they not deemed ready, or what's the analysis there?
Yeah, so those, there was one proposal that was not invited, pre-proposal that was not invited for a full proposal that we kind of deemed ineligible. Those two proposals, we gave the applicants feedback after the pre-proposals. The Slocum Dam project was not coastal. It was really, they were proposing to put in a prefabricated fish passage structure on a dam that was being repaired. And it wasn't really clear to us whether some of the funding would be going to the dam repair.
Okay.
It wasn't clear that the fish passage was going to be effective. We weren't convinced of that by what they submitted. And it was privately owned. So the pond above the structure was part of a camp, and dam removal was not explored because they wanted to keep the pond for recreation purposes, which is completely understandable, but the habitat benefit was what was missing from that proposal. And so that was our reason for not deciding to fund that one. The Blackstone Park proposal, we have funded similar projects in Blackstone Park that dealt with erosion in the upland in the park. It is coastally located, it's right next to the Seekonk River there. There is a severe erosion problem. It's not as coastal as some of the other projects, so there's not that direct connection. But basically, we felt like this year, the need for the other projects was great enough. We needed to eliminate a project, and that one is really more of a stormwater issue. So it's not coastal flooding. It's really, there's dogs that run around the park, and there's erosion going on, and it's a stormwater management issue. So
yeah.
This is another thing that the committee does. We're going to, be in touch with them about accessing stormwater management funds and helping them to apply for some of that money. So if we can direct applicants to funds that are more appropriate, then we have additional habitat funding to use for this.
Great.
So that's kind of the thinking behind those two they just didn't score as high as the other proposals.
Thank you. Are there other council members that have questions for Ms. Chafee? Mr. Gomez,
Always have questions, huh?
I know. I can count on you.
Caitlin, I'm interested in that third beach restoration fund, and I have been through there, and it, you know, it's a great looking area and it's a beautiful spot. So I was just wondering, is the damage still occurring? You know, it mentions people trespassing on the property, and I don't know if they trespass, but use it as a pathway to get to the beach and things like that. It looks like that past efforts are doing fairly well. And it states that it's a 23-acre site. And I was just wondering if there are nearby sites that have the same problem, dunes and things on the third beach side. So just a little bit more background on that would be appreciated. But it looks like, to me, it looks like a great project.
Yeah, and I do think we had questions about where exactly the work would be occurring. So yes, we did have to clarify that with the applicant. And so we did determine that where they were proposing to do the work was an area that was impacted by foot traffic. You'll see that we actually are proposing to fund them for a little bit more than they're asking for, because their proposal was to work with NRCS to put up dune fencing, which we did not think was appropriate. That is a piping plover breeding area. Fish and Wildlife expressed that they would have some issues with that. So what we encourage them to do, I don't know if you've been out to Napatree Point, where they have the split rail fencing.
Yes.
That helps to direct pedestrians, keep them on narrow footpaths without disturbing the processes of sand moving around, and there's no impact to the plover habitat. We encouraged the Norman Bird Sanctuary to go that route, and we gave them a little additional funding to do that. So the idea is they'll keep that footpath, but they'll corral people with this unobtrusive fencing that's going to allow the natural sand processes to keep to.
I'm familiar with Briggs Beach, and they have a very large stretch for piping plovers. And they just use a rope barrier and some signs, but it's obviously different than the third beach habitat. And I didn't know that the snow fence was not a good thing. I thought that's the old classic way to stop sand from moving, I guess.
Right, and in this case, it's not. But that's the advantage of having we have like a plover expert on our committee. So she was able to let us know that was going to be an issue. So.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions about what was presented, the recommended funding projects? Okay, I don't see any other questions. So at this point, you're looking for a motion to approve the recommended 7 projects, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, would someone like to make that? Oh, Mr. Willis.
Madam Chair, just to clarify, and Caitlin, correct me if I'm incorrect, but in addition to those 7, you're also looking for the 1 contingent project.
Correct. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks.
Also.
Oh, I
yes.
see that.
So we do that each year. We do, if there are projects that don't quite make the cut, but we feel they could be funded if anything happens with any of the other projects. We do that so that we could quickly turn around and reallocate those funds to those projects. So we did put the Blackstone Park project in that category. So that's the 1 contingency. So this is just if plans fall through, if a landowner decides they don't want the project done, then it's a pre-approved place to put that money.
Okay, so motion to approve the 7 recommended with the 1 contingent.
Madam Chair, Mike
Yes.
Hudner, I approve the passage of the motion for the 7 projects and the 1 contingent project.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Gomez, second.
This motion? Mr. Gomez, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, I'm going to do a roll call. Mr. Koya,
Madam Chair, based upon the presentation and the authority granted to us, I vote aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Reynolds votes aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro, aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez, aye.
Mike Hudner,
Hudner, aye.
Jerry Sahajian,
Sahajian, aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. The motion to approve the 7 projects with the contingency carries. And thank you for coming back.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I
members
hope
of the
you're doing
council.
well in your new position.
Caitlin, great to see you.
Good to see you all. Thank you so much.
Bye. Okay, next or last on the agenda is request for executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42-46-5, subpart A2, litigation, discussion on Champlins versus CRMC Supreme Court appeal. At this point, I'll indicate that I need to recuse myself from the executive session due to the fact that in the early 2000s, I did represent the Committee for the Great Salt Pond, which was and is an objector intervener on the subject application. So I'm going to turn over the meeting at this point to Mr. Koya as my vice chair, and I'm going to leave the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
All right, be well.
Thanks.
All right, next matter on the agenda is an agenda item request for executive session. So I would entertain a motion that the council go into executive session.
So move, Mr. Chair.
Motion's made. Is there a second?
Second, Mike Hudner.
Motion made and seconded. I'll do it collectively. All in favor, say aye.
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 No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Under the Open Meetings Act, it has to be a roll call vote.
All right, I'm looking at my pictures, make sure I got everything. All right, Mr. Gomez,
Aye.
Ms. Montanaro,
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds,
Aye.
Mr. Sahajian,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon,
Aye.
Mr. Hudner.
Aye.
I too vote aye. I think I got everyone, correct? So we are now in the executive session, and I will turn it over to our chief counsel, Anthony
You
DeSisto.
have to leave the meeting or?
Yeah, I just, Lisa's not, Jeff?
Yes, so Mr. Chair, Ryan, our moderator, will be setting up the break room to put us all,
Okay,
and then he will move us into that break room while the rest of the audience just stays on this link while we're in executive session. So Ryan is working that right now.
all right.
Jeff, do we have to leave this meeting and go somewhere else?
No, we just, the reason why we picked this format for tonight's meeting was because of the executive session, so that we can all be on the same link. We will just be put into these break rooms that only us will be in attendance for. But the link itself will be for everybody else to be in the meeting while we are in a break room by ourselves.
And just to clarify, the executive session will be council members, legal counsel, and the executive director.
Right.
Myself and all other attendees will not be in the executive session.
Mr. Willis,
Yes,
will you
Ron?
be in the breakout room as well?
Yes, I will be.
Okay. Just give me one moment. And once you're done, you can just join the meeting back again.
Correct.
Second,
Done.
Hudner, second leaving executive session.
All right, motion's been made. I'll do a roll call. Mr. Sahajian,
Yes.
Ms. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Hudner,
Aye.
Mr. Gomez,
Aye.
Ms. Montanaro.
Aye.
I too vote aye. I think we got everyone. So we are now out of executive session. I'd entertain a motion to seal the minutes of our executive session.
Mr. Wills has a question.
Mr. Chair, you missed Mr. Gagnon.
Oh, there we are.
Yep, I'm here. Aye.
Back to the vote, just a clarification, back to the vote for exiting executive session. Mr. Gagnon?
Aye.
All right. So we are now out of executive session. Is
Mr. Chair, I move that we seal the minutes from the executive session.
there a second?
I second the motion. Hudner.
Mr. Hudner seconded. Motion made and seconded. Do a roll call, Mr. Sahajian,
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds,
Aye.
Mr. Hudner,
Aye.
Mr. Gomez,
Aye.
Ms. Montanaro,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon.
Aye.
I do vote aye. As it relates to sealing of the minutes, anything else to come before the council in our general session now?
Mr. Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Motion been made. Is there a second?
Second the motion, Hudner.
Motion made and seconded. Just to be consistent, do a roll call. Mr. Sahajian,
Aye.
Ms. Reynolds,
Aye.
Mr. Hudner,
Aye.
Mr. Gomez,
Aye.
Ms. Montanaro,
Aye.
Mr. Gagnon.
Aye.
I too vote aye. So the meeting is adjourned and everyone be safe.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
all.